when you draw that line, when you consciously decide that enough is enough. You're not just adjusting a behavior, you're rewriting your entire operating system. You're telling the world, and more importantly, telling yourself, this is who I am now. And that shift, it's permanent if you enforce it. Because that's the difference. Everyone has moments of clarity, bursts of motivation, flashes of inspiration. But few people enforce the new standard when life gets messy. Most fall back to comfort, to convenience, to the level they've always lived at. Not because they're weak, but because they haven't made the new standard non-negotiable. They haven't burned the boats behind them. The results you want aren't sitting at the edge of motivation. They live on the other side of commitment to your new baseline. When excellence becomes your default, when you refuse to let your old self run the show, when you stop making excuses and start making demands of yourself, everything elevates. And this isn't about perfection. It's about alignment. It's about closing the gap between what you say you want and what your daily standards allow. If those two don't match, frustration is guaranteed. But when they do match, you become dangerous, consistent, respected, unstoppable. This is the hard truth. Your life will never exceed the standards you enforce. So if you want more, expect more. If you want better, be better. Raise the line. Then guard it with everything you've got. And if the answer is no, if something inside you knows that you're meant for more, built for more, capable of more, then that's the moment everything can shift. But it doesn't shift because you hope it will. It doesn't shift because you write down a goal or make a vision board. It shifts when you decide that the old standard is done. When you draw the line in the sand and say, that's it. I'm not living beneath myself anymore. Because the world doesn't give you what you want. It reflects who you are. And if you want the world to treat you differently, you must first treat yourself differently. You must stop tolerating the old you. You must stop returning to the version of yourself that let things slide, that gave up too soon, that played it safe. You must decide right now that the life you want is not a dream, it's a requirement. Not something you're chasing, but something you're building. And it starts with your standard. That's the lever. That's the switch. That's the thermostat. When you turn it up and leave it there. When you hold yourself to it long enough to let it rewire who you are. You won't have to wonder if change is possible. You'll be living proof that it is. Because the truth is, consistency isn't built on motivation. It's built on design. It's about constructing a life that reinforces your decisions, not one that constantly tempts you to backslide. When your environment supports the standard you've chosen, you're not fighting upstream every day. You're not depending on willpower to carry you through chaos. You've aligned your world with the identity you're stepping into. You've created conditions that make execution easier, not harder. You build systems around your new standard. You don't just declare who you are. You design for it. If you say you're done with inconsistency, you don't leave your schedule to chance. You create routines that lock in the habits that reinforce your discipline. If you say your health is now a priority, you structure your meals, your sleep, your movement so that your body has no choice but to level up. You eliminate the junk, physical, mental, and emotional, that kept dragging you backward. Because habits win when the environment supports them. And failure creeps in when you try to change your life but keep everything around you the same. You can't raise your standard and leave the structure behind. If your world is designed for your old self, your old habits will come crawling back. You'll fall into autopilot. And autopilot runs on the past. This is where most people lose the momentum. They get inspired, they feel the fire, they make a bold decision. But they don't reinforce it. They don't anchor it into their daily systems. And when life pushes back, when the old pressure shows up, when the noise gets loud again, they crumble. Not because they're weak, because the new identity never had a strong enough foundation. That's why rituals matter. That's why habits matter. That's why accountability, structure, and clarity matter. because your standard, no matter how high, means nothing if your actions don't align with it every single day. It's not what you say in moments of motivation. It's what you do when no one's watching. You design your life around your next level, not your current comfort. You set boundaries around your energy. You put systems in place so you don't have to think, guess, or negotiate. You just do. You execute. You live as the person you've already decided to become. And over time, something incredible happens. The new standard that once felt like a stretch becomes your new normal. You don't have to hype yourself up to show up. You just do. You don't have to fight for focus. It's built in. You don't have to keep proving it to yourself. You become it. That's the power of a raised standard backed by real structure. That's how a decision becomes an identity. That's how goals turn into results. And that's how average turns into excellence. One aligned action at a time. And that includes the people you surround yourself with. Your standard doesn't exist in a vacuum. It will either be elevated or eroded by the energy around you. If your circle is filled with people who accept the bare minimum, who normalize excuses, who quit the moment things get hard, you will unconsciously begin to align with that level. Because no matter how driven you are, your environment has weight. And over time, it starts to pull. You need people who challenge you. Not people who compete with your vision, but people who expand it. People who see more in you and speak to that version. People who call you out when you slip. Who don't applaud your mediocrity. Who don't let you settle. Who demand your best. Not because they're hard on you, but because they respect your potential. That's the kind of circle that sustains a high standard. And if you don't have those people yet, you become that person for yourself. You become the one who raises the bar. The one who refuses to tolerate the excuses. The one who sets the tone for how you think, how you train, how you lead. You create a standard so strong that your environment has no choice but to evolve or exit. Because when you raise your standard, your circle will shift. Some people will rise with you. Some will fall away. That's not drama. That's alignment. That's what happens when you stop living by who you've been and start living by who you're becoming. Growth isn't always about adding. Sometimes it's about subtracting. Subtracting the patterns that sabotage. The mindsets that shrink you. The people who keep you small. It's not cold. It's clarity. It's not selfish. It's self-respect. When you're committed to your next level, you stop apologizing for outgrowing anything that belongs to the past. But make no mistake, the real resistance won't just come from the outside. It'll come from within. That voice in your head. The one that tells you you're not ready, you're not good enough, you've never done this before. It's not the truth. It's the echo of your old identity. It's your past fighting to keep you predictable. Your subconscious is wired to protect you. It will try to anchor you in familiarity, even when familiarity means stagnation. That voice will whisper things like, "Who do you think you are? You've never been that disciplined. You always mess this up." It will feed you stories, not because they're true, but because they're comfortable. That voice wants safety. But greatness doesn't live in safety. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. And when you hear that voice, when that inner friction shows up, you don't run from it. You don't beg it to stop. You recognize it for what it is, a sign, a signal that you are stepping beyond your current limits, a signal that your standard is rising, a signal that you are no longer playing by the rules of your past. And then you act. You move, you override the noise with execution. Because you don't change your life by negotiating with fear. You change it by walking through fear. You don't silence the old voice by yelling back at it. You silence it by proving it wrong. Every time you show up, every time you push forward in spite of that doubt, you chip away at the old you, you rewrite the script. You retrain your nervous system. And eventually that voice gets quieter. Not because it disappears, but because it knows you're not listening anymore. Because now your standard speaks louder than your fear. Every time you act in alignment with your new standard, you chip away at the old identity. You rewire how you see yourself. You create new neural pathways, new emotional patterns, and most importantly, new proof that you are no longer that version of you who played small, broke promises meant, or disappeared when it got hard. Every decision becomes evidence. Every disciplined action, every follow through, every time you choose the higher path, you're stacking undeniable proof that you've changed. And over time, that stack becomes your foundation. Not a loud, surface level confidence, but a deep rooted certainty. It's not performative. It's not hype. It's quiet. It's calm. It's the kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself because it's built in truth. It's built in consistency. It's built in alignment. That's real power. That's integrity. That's trust in yourself. And once you have that, nothing external can shake it because it doesn't depend on applause. It doesn't depend on outcomes. It's built on action. It's built on becoming the kind of person who always shows up. And this is the real win. Sure, your results will shift. Your fitness, your income, your relationships, yes, they'll evolve. But the biggest transformation is internal. It's not about what you achieve. It's about who you become in the process. The person who no longer settles. The person who doesn't tolerate their own excuses. The person who looks in the mirror and knows they're doing the work. But even with all that growth, there's still another layer, a deeper test. Because when you raise your standard, it doesn't erase the gap between where you are and where you want to be. It exposes it. It brings it into focus. It makes it undeniable. And that can be uncomfortable because now you see it clearly. Now you feel the friction. Now you can't hide from the reality of how far you still have to go. But that discomfort, that's your advantage. That's clarity. That's your roadmap. It's not judgment. It's guidance. It's the truth telling you, here's what you still need to build. Here's what needs to be tightened. Here's where you're falling short of your potential. And you have a choice. Run from that truth or rise to meet it. Lie to yourself or lead yourself. Because the moment you stop pretending, the moment you stop saying, I'm doing my best when you know you're not, the moment you stop sugarcoating your effort and face the truth, you reclaim power. You stop leaking energy into justification. You stop weakening yourself with half-truths. You stop building your identity on false foundations. And that's where everything changes. Because you can't grow from a lie. But once you stand in full ownership, raw, honest, real, you can build something unbreakable, something that lasts. Something that's truly yours. Most people don't fail because life is unfair or because they didn't have the resources. They fail because of self-deception. They lie to themselves about their effort. They convince themselves they're all in, but their actions say otherwise. They tell themselves they're giving everything they've got, but deep down they know they're holding back. And rather than confront that truth, they look for something else to blame. Circumstances, timing, other people. Anything that helps them avoid the real conversation they need to have with themselves. But high performers, people who actually live by elite standards, don't play that game. They don't make excuses. They don't hide behind soft language. They are brutally honest with themselves. Not because they enjoy the pain of truth, but because they understand that truth is the only path to growth. If you want to build something strong, something that lasts, something that can withstand pressure, you don't build it on denial. You build it on truth. You look yourself in the eye and say, that's not good enough. And you don't say it to tear yourself down. You say it so you can rise. This is where transformation begins. Not with hype, not with motivation, but with ownership. It starts when you stop negotiating with your weakness, when you stop rationalizing low standards, when you catch the moment you're slipping, and instead of justifying it, you correct it. That's when things start to shift. And in that process, something else starts to grow, something rare, self-respect. Because there is no shortcut to that. You can't fake it. You can't talk your way into it. You have to earn it. You earn it by holding the line, by doing what you said you'd do, by showing up even when it's hard. And every time you do that, you prove to yourself that you can trust you. That trust is power. It's the kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't bend under pressure. Because when you respect yourself, you stop needing validation from anyone else. You stop shrinking to fit into rooms that don't challenge you. You stop apologizing for raising the bar. You stop asking permission to live at your highest level. And then you realize the power was never missing. It was never out there in the world waiting to be found. It was in you. It always was. It was just buried under excuses, under old stories, under low standards. And the switch that flips it on, it's your standards. When you raise them and actually live by them, you activate the part of yourself that doesn't settle, the part that doesn't retreat, the part that's been waiting for you to lead, what you demand from yourself, what you expect from yourself, what you refuse to tolerate from yourself. That's where everything changes. Because when you raise your internal standard and start holding yourself to it, consistently, unapologetically, your external world begins to shift in response. Your relationships change. Not because you force them to, but because they naturally evolve to match your new energy. People treat you how you treat yourself. When you start living with discipline, clarity, and self-respect, you stop accepting one-sided effort. You stop tolerating inconsistency, disrespect, or passive commitment. You no longer chase people who don't reciprocate. You don't entertain energy that doesn't match yours. The higher your standard gets, the tighter your filter becomes. And anything that doesn't align simply doesn't stay. Your environment transforms too. You become hyper aware of what drains you, distracts you, or pulls you backward. You stop spending time in places that don't fuel your vision. You stop feeding your mind with low-level input. And instead of reacting to your environment, you start designing it. Intentionally, strategically. Because you understand that your surroundings must support your evolution and your time. It becomes non-negotiable. You no longer give hours away to things that don't matter. You stop saying yes to obligations that don't align with your mission. You guard your time with the same intensity that you guard your standards. Because you realize that time is not just a resource. It's your currency. It's the investment you're making in your future. And once you see it that way, you stop wasting it. Your habits shift too. They stop feeling like chores. They become your baseline. Not because someone's watching, not because you're chasing validation, but because that's who you are now. You're no longer doing these things to prove something. You're doing them because they reflect the standard you've chosen to live by. You are the person who shows up, who follows through, who leads from the front. And the most powerful part, you start influencing people without even trying. People see you, they feel your presence. They notice your discipline, your integrity, your energy. You don't have to preach. You don't have to convince. You just live your standard, and your life becomes the message. Your consistency becomes contagious. Your focus becomes magnetic. You begin to raise the temperature of every room you walk into. That's leadership, not by title, not by permission, by example. And the world will either rise with you or move out of your way. But none of it happens if you don't lead yourself first. You can't ask others to rise if you're still shrinking. You can't expect people to follow if you haven't built the courage to stand. And self-leadership isn't about being flawless. It's not about pretending you've got it all figured out. It's about owning your evolution. It's about staying in the fight. It's about refusing to back down from who you know you're meant to become. No matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it gets, no matter who doubts you along the way. So when things get hard, and they will, you don't collapse. You don't lower your standard to match your circumstances. You raise your effort to match your standard. You rise, you adapt, you persist. Not because it's easy, not because it always feels good, but because you've decided that quitting is no longer an option. The standard is set. The line is drawn. There's no going back. Living with high standards doesn't make life easier. It makes life clearer. It removes the fog. You start to see what you were blind to before. You notice the little compromises you used to accept. You feel how much time you used to waste, how many excuses you used to make, how often you handed over your power for the sake of comfort, convenience, or approval. And when that awareness hits, it's sharp. It's honest. Sometimes it stings because you can no longer lie to yourself. You see yourself clearly. And that's the beginning of real growth. This isn't about shame. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about facing what's true. Because truth always comes before transformation. You can't grow from a lie. You can't rise from a foundation you won't admit is broken. So you ask the real questions. Where have I been cutting corners? Where have I been lying to myself? Where have I been choosing ease over excellence? And you answer them without flinching. Because if you don't confront it, you can't correct it. You can't change what you won't own. Most people stay stuck, not because they aren't capable, but because they keep running from the truth. They think hiding from it will protect them. But the hiding is what's costing them everything. Your standard is forged in those quiet moments when no one's watching. It's not built in front of crowds. It's built in the silence, in the tension, in the daily decisions you make when no one else will ever know. That's the real work. That's where greatness is formed. And the people who live at the highest level, they don't negotiate with their standard. They don't lower it to match their mood. They don't need hype, applause, or recognition to stay disciplined. Their reward is internal. It's the quiet pride of knowing they stayed true. It's the self-respect that comes from keeping their word to themselves. It's the unshakable integrity of knowing they are who they say they are. That kind of pride doesn't fade. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't swing with emotion. It becomes a foundation. It becomes fuel. It becomes the force that keeps you moving long after motivation runs out. And when the world tries to shake you, when life pushes back, when everything feels heavy, that standard, that pride, that discipline holds the line. Because you've earned it, you've built it, and no one can take that from you. But it only comes when you raise the bar and refuse to lower it again. When you stop letting your mood dictate your standards. When you stop measuring your commitment by how you feel and start measuring it by what you said you'd do. That's the shift. That's when everything starts to lock in. Because every time you follow through, you reinforce that standard. Every time you keep your word, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient, you send the message to yourself. We're not going back. That message matters. That's how trust in yourself is built. Not through talk, but through consistent execution. And every time you choose to act over excuse, to rise instead of retreat, to honor the standard over how you feel, you embed that identity deeper. Eventually, that identity becomes who you are. It no longer takes effort to show up. It takes effort not to. The things that once felt like a grind become automatic. The actions that once drained you now energize you. The work you used to resist becomes your rhythm. But you only get there through repetition, through deliberate, relentless repetition. Because repetition creates identity. Repetition makes it real. You don't become disciplined by thinking about it. You become disciplined by proving it to yourself over and over until your brain accepts it as fact. And here's where most people fall off. Patience. They do the work, but they want to see the payoff immediately. They expect instant change, instant growth, instant reward. And when they don't see it fast enough, they quit. They say it's not working, when in reality it's working. It just hasn't surfaced yet. Change doesn't always announce itself with a big moment. It often starts invisibly, deep inside where no one can see it yet. And that's why most people give up too soon. They're looking for evidence outside before they've done the real work inside. But if you keep going, if you keep showing up, keep executing, keep living by the standard, even when no one claps, even when no one notices, eventually the results show up. And when they do, they don't whisper. They shout. People will start to notice. They'll ask what changed. And the answer won't be some secret hack or breakthrough strategy. The answer will be, I stopped going back. I raised my standard. And I haven't looked down since. By then, it won't even feel like change. It'll feel like who you are. Because that's the real power of living by a higher standard. It stops being something you're trying to maintain and starts being something you simply are. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. Most people already know what they need to do. They're not confused. They're not lost. They're not waiting for some magical piece of information to arrive. Deep down, they already know. They know the habits they need to break. They know the routines they need to change. They know the choices they keep making that don't align with the life they say they want. What they don't have isn't knowledge. It's standards. They don't need another blueprint. They don't need more tips or another motivational video. What they need is a moment of decision. A moment where they raise the bar and say enough. Because once your standard rises, everything else follows. You stop waiting and start doing. You stop looking for shortcuts and start solving problems. You find energy where there wasn't any. You start cutting the noise. You stop justifying distractions. You get creative. You get scrappy. You get committed. Not because the path got easier, but because you refuse to go back to the way things were. That's the hidden power of raising your standard. It activates potential that's been dormant. It brings fire back to your focus. It pulls intensity out of you. It stretches your capacity. It draws out resourcefulness you forgot you had. It makes you grow because now mediocrity is no longer acceptable. And even more important, it strips away the fallback options. It removes the exit doors. When your standard is excellence, mediocrity isn't even a thought. When your standard is growth, staying the same becomes unbearable. When your standard is integrity, you can no longer tolerate your own excuses. That clarity simplifies everything. Because now you're not making decisions from emotion. You're not moving based on how the day feels. You're moving from identity, from the non-negotiable level you've chosen to live at. And when your choices come from identity, not feelings, your life starts compounding in the right direction. That's when you become dangerous. That's when you become unstoppable. That's when momentum builds and pressure doesn't shake you. It fuels you. You've always had that power. It was never about lack. It was never about waiting. It was never about someone else showing up to save you. It was about deciding. Deciding that from now on, what you've tolerated is no longer enough. That you don't need approval. You don't need permission. You need standards. High ones, aligned ones that make you stretch, grind, commit, and evolve. Because the version of you you've been is not the version of you who's going to get what you really want. And the line between the two. That line is drawn by your standard. Everything you want begins with that decision. That one defining moment of clarity when you stop negotiating with your potential. When you stop explaining away your inconsistency. When you stop tolerating the gap between who you are and who you could be. It's the moment you draw the line in the sand and say, this is where it changes. This is who I become now. This is the new level I hold myself to. From this day forward. Not because it's easy. Not because you have everything figured out. But because you're done living beneath the level you're capable of. Because no lasting change comes from a temporary burst of motivation. No breakthrough sustains itself unless you build a foundation underneath it. Transformation doesn't stick unless your identity, your expectations, and your discipline are built to support it. And you don't get there on willpower alone. Willpower is a spark. But if you want to build a fire, you need structure. You need standards. You get there by raising your minimum, not just dreaming of your maximum. You shift what you consider acceptable. You stop returning to what once felt normal. You elevate the floor so that even your off days are still aligned with excellence. Because when your standard is low, you can still have flashes of greatness. You can have peak moments, but they won't last. The second life gets heavy, the second resistance shows up, the second motivation fades. You'll fall back to what you've trained to be your default. And most people call that failure. But it's not failure. It's just a return to standard. So if you want a different life, raise the standard. Redefine what's normal. Set a new baseline. Build a structure that supports it. Anchor your habits, your routines, your mindset to it. Align your circle with it. Speak to yourself in a way that reinforces it. And do not waver. Not when it's hard. Not when it's inconvenient. Not when no one's watching. Because those are the moments that define whether the shift is real. That's when your new identity is being tested. That's when your new life is being built. Not in the highlights, but in the discipline of your new normal. Not when things are easy, but when your environment challenges your new standard and you push back harder. That's when the real shift happens. That's when you stop just talking about change and start embodying it. Because the rewards for living this way are not only visible on the outside. Yes, your results will evolve. Yes, people will start paying attention. Yes, new opportunities will find their way to you. But the real reward, it's internal. It's who you become in the process. You become someone who doesn't shrink, someone who doesn't settle, someone who keeps their word, not to impress the world, but to stay true to yourself. That kind of self-respect cannot be bought. That kind of self-trust cannot be faked. It's earned. Over time, through repetition, one decision at a time. One moment of discipline when it would have been easier to give in. One choice to rise instead of retreat. And that's why from this day forward, you check yourself. Not once in a while. Not only when you feel motivated. Every single day, you ask, does this decision reflect my new standard? Does this behavior match the future I'm building? Am I honoring the identity I committed to? Or am I slipping back into the comfort I said I left behind? And when you catch yourself slipping, and you will, you don't fall apart. You don't quit. You don't spiral. You don't shame yourself. You reset. You realign. You correct the drift. You remind yourself, this is a new life now. This isn't about being perfect. This is about refusing to negotiate with your past self. This is about setting a standard so strong that the only version of you that survives is the one who leads, executes, and delivers, no matter the circumstances. Because when that version of you becomes your default, everything in your life will rise to meet it. Your health, your relationships, your money, your mindset, your impact, your peace. All of it will begin to reflect the new standard you live by. Because life always mirrors the identity you consistently choose to embody.